sun comes up on America. Across open fields, small towns, and city streets, a new day begins. And here, we rise with it. This is where hard work meets headlines, where truth matters, and America wakes up informed.
An interesting week.
They all are.
This is your country. This is your morning. This is Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. America, let's do it together.
Love you, Ivy.
Love you too.
And it starts right now.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, this is Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy on Daybreak this Friday, August 7th of 2026. Thanks so much for being alongside. Here are three big things you need to know. 1. Dr. Anthony Fauci faces possible prosecution after Republican senators voted to hold him in contempt of Congress. The vote by the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee comes after the former White House health advisor invoked the Fifth Amendment more than 100 times in a hearing about the COVID-19 pandemic last week. The Department of Justice now can move to consider charging Fauci with an actual crime. 2. The man suspected of starting one of the major wildfires scorching Spokane, Washington, is back behind bars after making a brief court appearance on Thursday. During the hearing, bond for Anthony Farinacci was set at $2 million. The fires have caused widespread destruction, led to more than 60,000 people evacuating their homes over the past week. And 3, Republican U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell announced via a statement on Thursday that he's been discharged from a rehab center and will continue his recovery at home. McConnell first hospitalized back on June 14th for reasons that were initially undisclosed by his office. No word on when he might return to work in Washington. That's where we start hour one of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in on this Friday. We've made it to the end of the week. Steve and Ivy back on Monday. Thanks so much for being here. I'm here at Hillsdale College, where I serve as the general manager of the award-winning student radio station, WRFH, also a lecturer in journalism. I teach in our journalism department here, and director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. You hear me hosting a number of shows like the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, heard on many fine radio stations across the country over the weekend, also available in podcast form. I host one called Political Beats, Wasn't That Special, Future of Freedom. I'm out there. You can find me. I'm on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM. At last check this morning, 3 away from 5,500 followers there. So why not stop by and say hello? Also find my work at scottbertram.com, where I corral all my media doings. A brief note, we opened with Dr. Fauci, who now might be facing some prosecution after the Senate Homeland Security Committee vote yesterday. Such a striking comparison. This week's Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, which I host, features some excerpts from a lecture, a speech given by Jay Bhattacharya, who's now at the National Institutes of Health, but previously was part of the Great Barrington Declaration, one of those scientists, along with Scott Atlas and others, who were pushing back forcefully against Dr. Fauci and lockdowns, all this stuff during COVID. Listening to him talk and discuss what he calls a second scientific revolution, how to improve science, how to make sure things don't happen that way again. It's kind of inspiring. You can hear Jay Bhattacharya on this week's Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up this hour, Camden Mulder with us after the bottom of the hour. She is with National Review. She followed the Michigan Senate race this week. She did something I've been begging journalists to do all week long. I'll tell you about that in about 10 minutes. Adam Butcher also with us this morning. He's president and managing partner at Basin Ventures. We'll talk energy with him. We start in Michigan, not just because I'm here in Michigan, because this U.S. Senate race, as we've talked about all week, Noah Rothman made clear yesterday when he joined us on the show, this is more than just a candidate against a candidate. It's more than that. There's more at stake here because this is the first socialist candidate who is now a major party nominee for a U.S. Senate seat in what is a purple state. And yes, I know El Sayed says he's not DSA, he's not affiliated. Again, believe your eyes and ears. What does he say? What does he do? What does he believe in? Who does he hang out with? Who endorses him? This is crystal clear. And this means that people on the left are going to have to work themselves into contortions to figure out how they're going to support this guy who really has a platform and followers who wish to turn the Democratic Party upside down. Chuck Schumer, of all people, is endorsing Abdul al-Sayed, though al-Sayed has said he doesn't want Chuck Schumer to be Senate leader for the Democrats. Still, he comes out in support. I saw a Democrat uh, journalist, a leftist sort of writer yesterday, suggesting that all Abdul al-Sayed has to do to win is stop talking about Israel. He would sooner stop breathing than stop talking about Israel. It is who he is to the core to be an Israel hater and perhaps an anti-Semite. Where you fall on that spectrum maybe varies on your beliefs. I think his words and actions would put him smack dab squarely in that description. The only people who seem clear-eyed about this are like John Fetterman, and it's hard to see John Fetterman now serving in a caucus alongside Abdul al-Sayed if he wins. And someone like Bill Maher, who we played earlier in the week, they see the socialist and communist takeover of this Democratic Party. Who doesn't care about it? Well, one is the Democratic nominee for governor in Michigan. She was asked earlier this week by WWMT News to just kind of agree with the statement that socialism is evil, shouldn't be tough, shouldn't be hard for our elected leaders or those who want to be elected leaders to simply say, yeah, socialism's bad, communism bad, socialism evil, not what we want here in the United States. Jocelyn Benson, who's the Democratic nominee for governor in Michigan, could not even rise to that low bar. This is cut number 9, Jocelyn Benson here in Michigan.
Secretary of State Benson, I just wanted to ask you, so your opponent is saying that you're pushing a socialist agenda, and he keeps calling out socialism, saying that it's evil. What do you have to say to him about that?
I mean, I think the only thing evil is when leaders claim to work for the people but really don't. I've worked for the people every day of my professional career. I'm going to be a governor who puts people first, lowers costs, grows our economy, and does everything I can to protect the rights and freedoms that are earned by every citizen in this state. My opponent can't say the same because he hasn't done the same, but I have, and I'll continue to do that as governor.
Secretary.
All right, won't say socialism is evil. The only thing she says is evil is claiming to work for the people and then not working for the people. I can think of some more evil things than that, including socialism. This also works in reverse, too. Democrats now all say we need a Big Tent, Big Tent, Big Tent, Big Tent. Don't care what people think as long as they vote for us. We want them in the Big Tent. And this includes, like Abdul al-Sayed, who won't disavow those who say America deserved 9/11. And this is why Mike Rogers is going to hammer home that point from now until November. Back early this week, Abdul al-Sayed, given the chance, won't disavow friends who say America deserved 9/11. This is cut number 8.
I mean, he said that you need to renounce people like the left-wing streamer Hassan Piker, who was campaigning with you, who was out there in Michigan on Monday night, I believe last night as well. Do you have any plans to do that?
Look, I'll tell you this. I'm less focused on folks who are campaigning with me, more focused on the folks I'm campaigning to. And I think it's important to stay in touch with the folks who you want to elect you.
There you are. He can't do it either. He can't disavow those folks and friends and campaign allies who say America deserved 9/11. Mike Rogers is going to pound that from now until November. There's no doubt about it. Scott Bertram sitting in for Stephen Ivey on this Friday morning daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Friday morning, Scott Bertram filling in this Friday. Steve and Ivy back on Monday of next week. Plenty of thoughts, plenty to say. Camden Mulder with us in around 15 minutes. She's with National Review. She covered the Michigan Senate race and was with Abdul al-Sayed throughout much of the week, including at his party on Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. This race in Michigan, the gubernatorial race in Wisconsin, which we'll talk deeper about in hour two. All these races, House race in Colorado, Congress races in New York involving socialist candidates, DSA candidates. We're going to be talking about socialism and capitalism. And earlier, Abdul al-Sayed was asked in a debate about being a socialist, and he denies it. He says, I'm not DSA. And then he also says, I'm not a socialist. I'm just a capitalist who knows how the system works. And this is the fig leaf that media members are going to use to say that Republicans and Mike Rogers are lying about Abdul al-Sayed when they say he's a socialist. Again, despite the fact that his policy prescriptions, his policy positions, his friends, his endorsers are all socialists, or many of them are socialists. Or at least I should say the socialists who are out there love Abdul al-Sayed. And you can see this already unfolding. MS Now yesterday, the former MSNBC, Vaughn Hilliard is the anchor here. And he's going to play a montage of Republicans talking about al-Sayed being a socialist, and then has to fact check, has to clarify right away. Listen to this quickly. This is cut 11, MS Now and Vaughn Hilliard yesterday.
But I want to let you take a look at the response of some Republicans to his candidacy. Take a listen.
These are actual communists.
The commie card's a gamble.
Look, these communists hate America. They hate capitalism.
Top Democrats now echoing the DSA's radical agenda.
We're looking at Mao. We're looking at Che Guevara. This is literally a communist takeover of the Democrat Party.
Okay, so al-Sayed is a self-described capitalist. But do Democrats need to forcefully push back against this latest Red Scare in order to win this race?
So Hilliard comes out. He's got a fact check. No. He's a self-described. He is capitalist. This is a Red Scare. Republicans are engaged in here against al-Sayed. Look, I begged a reporter this week to ask Abdul al-Sayed what he likes about capitalism. He says, I'm not a socialist, I'm a capitalist who knows how the system works. Okay, it should be pretty easy then to explain why you like capitalism, why it's the best system for us here in the U.S. if you're not a socialist. Someone asked him what he likes about capitalism. And I didn't know it, but our guest is coming up in about 10 minutes. Camden Mulder did just that. I think it was Tuesday. I think it was the day of the election, where she asked virtually the exact question I said someone should ask Abdul al-Sayed. We've got the audio. Camden Mulder from National Review shared the audio with us. Here is the question. Here is the answer. What does Abdul al-Sayed actually like about capitalism? Cut 10.
Camden Mulder with National Review. You've said that you're a capitalist, even though people continue to say that you're a socialist. Can you explain exactly what you like about capitalism?
It is the idea that you allow supply and demand to allocate capital at the micro level to enable people to make money in sustainable ways. The part that I have trouble with is that we don't live in capitalism. We live in corporatism, where we allow big corporations to move capital based on the interests of shareholders and a quarterly bottom line. That seems to be less about efficiently allocating capital based on supply demand and more about maneuvering or manipulating financial markets in ways that are more about the best interests of the richest people rather than the enablement of the efficient allocation of capital.
All right, there's the full answer from Abdul al-Sayed about what he likes about capitalism. What do you notice there? He doesn't actually answer the question, nor does he say what he likes about capitalism. He gives you a basic, anodyne definition of capitalism, then pivots and says, but we don't have capitalism in the U.S. We have this other system where there's, cronyism, and we don't have capitalism. Oh, if he is a capitalist and he likes capitalism, why is his ideas for solving the problems socialism and not more capitalism? That's a follow-up question that maybe someone else could ask. More socialists. Maylot Quiros is running for the House in Colorado. She's a socialist. She talked with PBS earlier in the week, and Margaret Hoover is the host here asking questions about the same topic: capitalism, socialism, communism. These are candidates who have a very real chance of being elected to office and serving Americans in Washington, D.C. Maylot Quiros says capitalism, communism, same thing, just as bad. Capitalism is just as bad as communism. She believes this. This is cut number 3.
First, are you a communist?
No, I'm not a communist.
How do you tackle the criticism that some members of the DSA, including half of the DSA leadership, seem to call themselves communist?
Yeah, well, some members of the Democratic Party are proudly proclaiming themselves as capitalists, and it's a big tent, right?
It's a big tent. They always come back to that. It's a big tent. We don't have to care what anyone thinks, believes, what their policies are, as long as they vote the right way and put that mark next to the D. That's fine. There she is, equating capitalism with communism. Yeah, some are communists, but yeah, some are capitalists too. We hate them. They're in the party. Follow up Margaret Hoover. They talk about how socialism is more American than capitalism. This is what Maylot Quiros says. Cut 4.
I don't think there's anything more American than subscribing to an economic philosophy that, as the evidence shows, is the only one that's actually capable of delivering things like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I really can't think of anything else.
Socialism has proven to deliver on the values of the Declaration of Independence more than capitalism has.
Yeah.
Yeah. Communism just killed millions across the globe, just as bad as capitalism. And socialism is more American than capitalism. So says Maylot Quiros, candidate for Congress in Colorado. Scott Bertram here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber on this Friday morning. Scott Bertram sitting in. Camden Mulder from National Review coming up in about 5 minutes or so. She followed the U.S. Senate race in Michigan on the ground this week. I do think it's interesting, too, to hear some of these ostensibly sort of neutral anchors, Margaret Hoover and others, who, when there are Trump-backed candidates, when there are candidates on the right, are very quick to say, well, that guy's a threat to democracy, that guy's weird, dangerous ideas, and yet they treat all these socialists as some sort of weird, fun, interesting experiment. Like, you have some unusual beliefs. Tell us more about how communism's awesome. Socialism is more American. That's an interesting take. Expound on that. It's not these are dangerous ideas. It's not these are ideas that are antithetical to America. It's not these are ideas that could crash our economic system, destroy our system of government as well. Remember, DSA, eliminate the Senate, change the Supreme Court, change the presidency. That's kind of weird and interesting. Tell me more about that. That is not the way any of them act toward Republicans and conservatives, and especially Trump-backed candidates. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by Patriot Mobile. Every day, Americans make choices that shape our country's future, right down to which cell phone provider we support. Here's what most people don't realize. Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless provider. They're an activist organization funded by top-tier cell phone service. They've been on the front lines, defending our freedoms long before it was cool, standing in the gap when others wouldn't. The best part is they deliver prioritized premium service on all three major U.S. networks, giving you the same or even better coverage backed by 100% U.S.-based customer support. Unlimited data plans, mobile hotspots, international roaming, and more. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you'll help grow a movement that fuels the Christian conservative cause. Every bill you pay helps advance the values of faith, family, and freedom. Switching is easier than ever. Activate in minutes. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade if you want. Go to patriotmobile.com/Gruber or call 972-PATRIOT and use the promo code Gruber for a free month of service. That's patriotmobile.com/Gruber or 972-PATRIOT and make the switch today. More next on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber on this Friday morning. Scott Bertram filling in. Thanks so much for joining us. You can find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM. A few of you joining me there this morning, pushing that follower count up. Thank you very much. You can also find me on the website, scottbertram.com. The show's out there, stevegruber.com, and at Steve Gruber Show on X. Steve is still posting from the hinterlands this week as he's out and about. He's back on Monday. Camden Mulder joins us now. William F. Buckley, Jr., fellow in political journalism over at National Review. You can read her at nationalreview.com. All week long, she spent in Michigan following the U.S. Senate race, and Abdul al-Sayed and Haley Stevens, and wrote a ton over at nationalreview.com. Camden, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, Scott. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
And listeners and viewers know how pleased I was that you asked that question to Abdul al-Sayed. I've been begging people to ask all week, and unbeknownst to me, you had done it on Tuesday, I believe, asking al-Sayed exactly what it is he likes about capitalism. We played that cut a little bit ago. We'll play it again later on in the show. So good job getting him to explain that. Do you think at this point his rhetoric, his focus shifts at all as we pivot to the general election, or is Abdul al-Sayed exactly who he is?
I mean, he certainly made it clear he is who he is, but if he wants to win against Mike Rogers, he's going to have to. When I was on the ground, I spoke to specifically a lot of Stevens voters who said that they're unwilling to vote for al-Sayed in a general election. And we've seen Mike Rogers and even other Democrats starting to coalesce online and join together to back the Republican candidate instead of al-Sayed. Many Stevens voters said this is specifically because of his really progressive and very frankly anti-Semitic views on Israel. And so if he wants to win, he knows what he needs to do. But at this point, he's been very clear about what he believes and what he wants to get done if he's elected. So if he does that, that's yet to be seen.
You were at al-Sayed's primary party on Tuesday night, which eventually turned into a victory party. It took a bit longer than I think people thought it would. You overheard conversations. You saw people talking. What were the main points of conversation among those al-Sayed backers who liked him enough to show up at a primary night party? What were they talking about as those results rolled in?
Most of them honestly were talking about Israel. And I think that's also representative of the type of voter that he captured in this state. He went on and on saying he was fighting for the working class voter. But we saw in the results of the election that Stevens was actually the one who got most of those votes, and the election was much closer than anticipated. So they talked a lot about, being frustrated with her and her beliefs regarding Israel, her receiving funding from AIPAC, and also too about just like spreading socialism more broadly across the U.S. Similarly spoke to Chris Rabb, who's running for the House in Pennsylvania and is backed by the DSA. Hassan Piker was there, and they all just spouted off very progressive views and talked about the importance of more DSA candidates and more DSA beliefs spreading across the U.S.
Camden Mulder with us from National Review, covering the Michigan primary this week on the ground in the Wolverine State. Did you get the feeling, and I know you didn't ask them specifically, did you get the feeling that these people at the party and those who you saw were members of the party? Are they Democrats, or are they people, now I'll use the phrase, infiltrating the Democratic Party to help these socialist candidates rise?
If they are Democrats, or if they were Democrats, they've certainly far exceeded what the more establishment party believes in and what they've stood for up to this point. I spoke to one attendee who's affiliated with the Progressive Caucus in Michigan, and he was going even as far to say that if al-Sayed had lost that night, because we spoke before the election was called, that he would vote third party. So these people certainly are not beholden to the Democratic establishment. They're actually feeling very disenfranchised by it and very frustrated with the establishment. And so to be able to pin their allegiance to either party at this point is difficult to do.
Camden, you wrote a piece prior to the election, Abdul al-Sayed's mask on, mask off socialism. And I've talked about this a lot this week too, which is Sayed will tell you to your face he's not a socialist, he's not a member of the DSA. And yet if you believe your eyes and ears, you know exactly who he is, what he stands for. Medicare for all his policy prescriptions. He's backed by the DSA. His friends are socialists. Bernie Sanders loves him. Is he going to be able to obfuscate the fact that no matter what he says, he is representing the socialist wing of the Democratic Party during this campaign?
It's going to be difficult, especially when, Republicans and more moderate voters are able to see through that and have seen, based on what he said and what he has on his website, that he is a socialist candidate. I think I spoke to someone at that event in Grand Rapids, and he came in wearing a DSA shirt. And then before he went to canvass to voters, he put a different shirt over top of his DSA shirt because he said he didn't want it to be a turnoff. And so El Sayed's supporters are smart enough to know that socialism is not polling well with the broader electorate, isn't going to do well with more moderate voters. And so it's one thing for El Sayed to know enough to be able to go in front of a camera reporter and say that he believes in capitalism, but for supporters to do so too also speaks to how he's run his campaign and a potential path to victory in November.
Candace Mulder with us here as she writes for nationalreview.com. William F. Buckley, Jr. Fellow in Political Journalism. You weren't with Mike Rogers during the week, but I know you're familiar with Mike Rogers. I'm almost certain you're a Michigan native too, Candace. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is Mike Rogers the kind of candidate that is going to be able to build this coalition among conservatives, Republicans, and also moderate centrists, Jewish voters, pro-Israel voters? Will that be enough to carry the day in November? A little crystal ball prognostication. Is Mike Rogers at least the kind of candidate that can appeal across the state of Michigan?
I actually did speak to Mike Rogers when I was in Michigan. The piece is coming on that. We had quite a long interview and were able to chat. And based on my conversation with him, I really do think so. He spoke a lot about bringing manufacturing back to Michigan and bolstering up our economy here. And obviously, when Stevens did so well with working class and lower middle class voters, I could see them finding a place with Mike Rogers in his camp when he talks about those things. He also talked a lot about just really wanting to put forward a Michigan first platform. And, when a lot of voters are frustrated with the amount that, Israel, for example, has been talked about in this election instead of Michigan issues, a lot of people can probably connect to what he's saying with that and relate to what he's saying and appreciate the fact that he wants to focus on what's going on in Michigan and not what's going on, let's say, in DC or even around the world.
All right, I'm going to ask you to give up a little bit more of the conversation. Watch nationalreview.com for this piece very soon. Did Mike Rogers say anything about what he learned from his very narrow loss to Alyssa Slotkin in the last cycle and how he might change his campaign, if at all, this time around?
He spoke about the fact that, they have just been door knocking like crazy. They've been on the ground. They've been working since December to get name recognition out there. And he's hoping that all their groundwork will pay off in November. And, especially paired with the craziness of his opponent, whether it was, Stevens or even further to the left. Now we have El Sayed. He just hopes that he is different enough and that voters see that and are willing to vote for him in November and bring a Republican back to the Senate in Michigan.
Candace Mulder, watch that space for the Mike Rogers conversation very soon. NationalReview.com. Great coverage this week on the ground in Michigan of this U.S. Senate race, both El Sayed and Stevens. She's with National Review. Find her work at NationalReview.com. Also follow on X. Candace, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Thank you so much for having me.
Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're off today, back on Monday after a week away. Many thoughts and opinions to share. Scott Bertram filling in. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, scottbertram.com. We're joined by Adam Butcher. He's president and managing partner at Basin Ventures, has the very cool X handle of at the TX Oil Man. Adam, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Hey, Scott, thanks a lot. Great to be here.
Good to have you. Energy is always a number one concern and number one priority for everyone around the country, which affects us in so many different ways. And people are most, affected directly with the gas prices they see every day up and down as they drive around town, fuel up. There's so much uncertainty around what's happening in Iran, so much uncertainty around the Strait. How should we see perhaps the short and medium term future of energy prices when it comes to putting gas in the tank?
Oh, goodness. If you asked me that question yesterday, I might have a different answer, and tomorrow I might have a different answer. The news changes every single day. I think I woke up this morning and we're firing rockets again in the straits, both of them. So I think once we get some stability in the region, which good luck, I suppose. But once we get some stability in the region, we understand what the playing field is. We'll start to understand how to deploy some of our capital in the energy space and start to stabilize some things. I think right now we're sitting at about $4 a gallon average, but if you take California out of that, we're much lower than that. I think California is at $5.62 a gallon. So there's a lot that goes into a price per gallon at the pump, besides just the price of oil. But certainly we could all use a little stability, and hopefully we'll get there soon.
We talk so much about Iran and moving oil in the Strait. What about domestic production, oil and gas production here in the United States? Are we doing enough to expand, opening up new markets, new areas, new places to find what we need for our livelihoods?
We are, Scott, but everything has a price, right? So this is a very capital intensive industry. It's very dangerous. You've got to pay people money to go do some dangerous work. So right now we're producing about 13.8 million barrels a day. That's more than at any time in our country's history. It's actually up 500,000 barrels a day from last. I think we're looking at all kinds of opportunities to open up new areas, to go into new plays, but we're limited on what pricing will support. We want to drill, baby, drill. Everybody wants to drill, baby, drill. We want to make sure that everybody has the product that they want, obviously, because we're a commercial enterprise. We want to make money just like everybody else. But when we're talking about pricing that's so uncertain, it's hard to commit hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars, in some cases billions, of dollars to a new area or to new infrastructure or to new projects if we have no idea what even reasonably we could expect in the near future, much less a couple years out, which most of these projects, once you commit the capital, it takes a while to get rolling.
Even Ivy Gruber, Scott Bertram filling in. Adam, as you look to the Trump administration, you got a couple of years left here in Donald Trump's second term. Are there any moves, maneuvers that they can provide to you and others in the industry that would at least give you a little more stability and a little more certainty, make your lives a little bit easier?
Yeah, I think it's quite simple. Maybe don't make energy policy on Twitter. That is a hard thing because we can't price a tweet. Have a certain standard operating procedure, and then on Friday we're firing rockets and we're doing other things, on Twitter that's kind of moving the price around. So I think he's done a great job in terms of deregulation, in terms of opening up opportunities for the infrastructure. We desperately need infrastructure, and by that I mean pipelines. We desperately need that infrastructure to make sure that we're able to utilize all of our American oil, but also our natural gas, which is going to be a huge thing in the years to come with AI and data centers. But I think if we could just if we could get to a point where we either finish the job in Iran, or we figure out what we're doing there, and we're not jumping back and forth every other day, it seems like that would be an easier thing for the industry, I think.
You mentioned natural gas, and I want to ask about that too. I recall in the Biden administration, so many restrictions and bans on exportation of liquefied natural gas to other countries around the world, and we have a lot of that here in the U.S. If I'm not mistaken, has the Trump administration helped to open those markets back to you? And what does the future of liquefied natural gas look like here in the U.S.?
Yes, that's been the biggest piece of this for the Trump administration, as far as I'm concerned. I like to say that I've always made more money under Democrats than I ever have under Republicans. And that's simply because their policies can be wonky enough that it affects prices and drives prices up, but they're not so crazy as to shut us down, usually. But the Biden administration did just that with liquid natural gas. And so you had years and years of gas stored in pipes that had nowhere to go. We're still maybe a year or two out from the real data center needs, although that is going to be very, very real. In fact, in Texas, where I'm sitting right now, I believe that with the data centers planned out, we have about 5 times the current need of what's sitting on our electrical grid right now coming down the pipe. So liquid natural gas, we have a willing partner in Western Europe that is, they're begging for our product. We have facilities on the Gulf Coast that needed to get permitted, that needed to get built. We have infrastructure, like I've mentioned before, that needs to get built out. Natural gas, many people think is just it is the fuel of the future. We could power our country on that for decades, and I know that Europe and other nations need it as well.
And at a much lower pollution point than perhaps some other ventures too. Adam Butcher, out of time here. President, Managing Partner at Basin Ventures. Find him on X at the TX Oil Man. Adam, thanks so much for your insight this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're back on Monday. You've got me, Scott Bertram, until this show's over today. Hopefully, I will be back soon. I enjoy filling in for Steve when he is out and unavailable and on vacation and covering breaking news. It truly is a pleasure and privilege to do so. And while I have a moment, I will thank Steve and Ivy publicly for the opportunity now for about a decade to do fill-in work. I just love it. I love being here with you, and also behind the scenes, Anthony, Sarah, Brock, who help make this happen each and every day. They make it very easy to fill in when I'm here for Steve and Ivy. So thanks to everyone involved. If you're looking for something to do this weekend, well, the world's longest yard sale is underway. Known as the world's largest yard sale, it's the 127 yard sale. Begins in Michigan, runs 690 miles through Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia before ending in Alabama. Gives the public the chance to stay off busy highways, enjoy scenic routes through small towns and rural communities. Runs through Sunday. I think that runs just north of us here in Hillsdale. There's Route 12, and there's a giant yard sale all up and down that roadway. And I assume that ties into this big yard sale across various states. So keep that in mind. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by the Wellness Company. This summer from coast to coast, we've been celebrating the 250th birthday of the greatest country on the planet, and that's America. I don't want any questions about that. It's not just a good time to reflect on 250 years of American exceptionalism. It's a great time to channel some of that American individualism and declare your independence from big pharma and the broken medical establishment. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. You see and hear from their doctors all the time on this program. You know their products are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you and your family safe and healthy. The Wellness Company gives you the opportunity to make sure you are prepared for whatever happens with their series of prescription medical kits. They contain an assortment of life-saving medications and guidebooks to assist in the proper use of those medications. Lots of other products as well. Celebrate 250 here in America by declaring your independence from big pharma. twc.health/Gruber. That's twc.health/Gruber. Use the promo code Gruber and you'll save 10% over at the Wellness Company. More of Daybreak is around the corner.
America's awake, and we're just getting started. The headlines that matter, the stories they won't tell you, and the voices fighting to be heard. This is your country, your morning, your daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. A new hour starts right now on Real America's Voice.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, where it was and still is a bit foggy this morning. I'm Scott Bertram, sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on Daybreak this Friday, August 7th of 2026. Thank you for being here. Here are three big things you need to know. Number one, President Trump signed a pair of executive orders at the White House yesterday relating to birthright citizenship. Orders restrict birthright citizenship involving children of foreign diplomatic staff, children of people classified as alien enemies, and children born in U.S. territories. Orders likely will be challenged after the Supreme Court struck down some other attempts by the Trump administration regarding birthright citizenship recently. 2. ATF agents were involved in a double fatal shooting in Nashville Thursday. The Metro Nashville Police Department confirms 2 people died during an ATF operation where one of the agents was shot and returned fire. Later in the same operation, agents shot another person who was pointing a gun at them. And 3, a woman who was struck by a flying baseball bat at a Yankees game back in June now suing the team for $10 million. Stephanie Dulick was sitting behind home plate on June 2nd. She says she's now suffering from a traumatic brain injury and has been unable to return to work. Her lawsuit alleges the netting behind home plate in her section was lower than in surrounding sections, and that's one of the reasons that she was hit by that flying bat. That's where we start hour 2 of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Steve and Ivy off today. They're back on Monday. Scott Bertram here. And as I say, I'm here at Hillsdale College, where I serve as general manager of the award-winning student radio station, WRFH, lecturer in journalism, and director of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. Find more at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio. And as I say, I only speak on behalf of me. I do not speak on behalf of the college itself when I guest host here for Steve. So they're just my bad ideas. That's what it comes down to. This hour, Jan Jekielek is with us. He has an incredible book called Killed to Order. We will only scratch the surface of this with him in the few minutes we have. But China's forced organ harvesting system. It's incredible stuff. Christian Schneider with us, too. Columnist at National Review Online. He writes at a number of places. He's a Madison resident. He's a Wisconsinite. He'll preview the Wisconsin gubernatorial race on Tuesday. We'll come back to that in a moment. And then I want to talk to you about a couple of things as we get toward the back half of the hour. It's my last day here, so I've had some thoughts that have backed up here. And we'll try to use some free time toward the back of the hour to talk about that. I've got a setup for you what's going to happen Tuesday in Wisconsin. So we spent a lot of this week talking about Senate in Michigan. Next week, attention turns to a socialist who is likely now to win the Democratic nomination for governor in the Badger State. And this is happening in large part because of malfeasance by the Democratic Party itself in Wisconsin, which for the past, half decade at least, has been on a bit of a winning streak. Since Scott Walker left the governor's mansion, really, they've had a good stretch of winning races, including Supreme Court races. Ron Johnson is still there, thankfully. But the Democrats in Wisconsin have done pretty well. They have totally fouled up this gubernatorial race. If you don't know how this unfolded, Governor Evers is leaving office. And so you had initially a 4-person race on the Democratic side. You had lieutenant governors, former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, a current Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez, Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, and a really crazy, loony, far-left bananas state representative, DSA-affiliated socialist Francesca Hong. And, of course, she's never going to win. Well, initially, those establishment candidates canceled each other out. Hong took a lead, and then people started to scramble. Crowley dropped out of the race to endorse Rodriguez, the current lieutenant governor. Then Rodriguez admitted to falsifying some financial reports uh, she said maybe she didn't do it, but she filed some bad financial reports, and she had to drop out of the race. So now Rodriguez is gone. So Crowley says, after being out of the race for 10 days, says, I'm going to get back in the race because no one thinks Mandela Barnes can win. And all the time, Barnes is there, a former lieutenant governor, saying, well, sure, I can win. So he's still in the race. And now Barnes has dropped out because of some allegations of bad behavior toward women. So in Wisconsin, you have two major Democratic candidates who are going to be on the ballot, and ballots are already being cast, votes are being made. They're not in the race anymore. And the one major candidate still in the race is David Crowley, who at one point said he didn't want to be in the race and had to be recruited back in after Rodriguez left. This is why the path looks so open for Francesca Hong. Now, my friend Jeff Blair writes this week over at National Review, public polling has her out to a significant lead. Now, we just saw how bad public polling did in Michigan. So do we trust it in Wisconsin? Also, she seems to have a cap of around 38% right now, at least in polling, that she can't bust through. And you might need more than that to win this race on Tuesday. So there's still reason to think she might not win, but the factors and the arrows are pointing toward Francesca Hong, the socialist, winning in Wisconsin. What are the kind of things that she believes? Well, defund the police for one, trying to walk that back a bit, of course, now. She had an interview earlier this week with Dana Perino, actually on Fox News, where she asked about this. This is cut one, Francesca Hong and Dana Perino.
I believe that people can evolve. We meet Trump voters from previous elections who now would like to vote for me, who have a sign in their yard.
So who needs to evolve, the voter
the
or
governor
you?
cannot defund the police, and I won't defund the police.
So
but
you
I
have
will
evolved.
invest in the things we know prevent crime, like getting guns off of our street, making sure there is victims for justice, that there are, places where our kids can go after school and thrive. We can't be tough on causes. We have to be tough on causes if we would like to be tough on crime. And as governor, I cannot defund the police. And I've reminded folks that I won't defund the police.
Okay.
Notice she doesn't say that she doesn't want to defund the police, that she doesn't still believe it should be defunded. She merely says, as governor, I cannot, and I will not defund the police. Doesn't quite walk back the actual sentiment behind it. And I think we played this on Monday of this week, but Francesca Hong, not just a socialist, but perhaps communist, because she's talking about seizing the means of production. Again, Dana Perino and Francesca Hong, the socialist Democrat running for governor in Wisconsin, saying, yeah, we should take over some of these public companies. Cut two.
Would you advocate for public ownership of America's largest corporations or those in Wisconsin?
I have to say, first of all, we are incredibly proud of our Green Bay Packers, a publicly owned NFL team. But I believe there are some manufacturing and corporation that is irresponsible to have full public control.
Well, like what?
No, I think it depends really on the type of mega corporation.
You'll have to elect me first to see which companies I want the state to take command of, to seize the means of production of. We're going to go deeper into this with Christian Schneider in about 15 minutes or so. He's a real Wisconsin resident. He lives in Madison. That's a scary proposition. Francesca Hong, also the one who wants to cancel Thanksgiving and refused to say, no, I won't cancel Thanksgiving in an interview earlier this week. It's fun times everywhere. We'll talk with Jan Jekielek next here on Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber here on Friday morning. Thanks so much for being alongside. Scott Bertrand filling in. Steve and Ivy back on Monday. We're joined now by Jan Jekielek. He is senior editor with the Epoch Times and also the author of the new book, Killed to Order, China's Organ Harvesting Industry and the True Nature of America's Biggest Adversary. And you can see the book right there. It's available now on Amazon.com and elsewhere. Jan, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
Scott, thrilled to be here.
Thanks so much for doing this. We had a longer conversation on another show I host, the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour. We have a shorter amount of time here, but it's such an important topic and one that I was blown away by the research and depth of details inside Kill to Order because, as I think you admit, Jan, this is a difficult premise to accept that a system of forced organ harvesting is operational and is being executed in China. Give us an overview and tell us why and how you became convinced that this was real and this needed a spotlight to be shown upon it.
Well, Scott, about 20 years ago in 2006, I kind of got hit over the head with the evidence. And let me just explain what it is. We're talking about large-scale forced organ harvesting, meaning taking organs for rich Chinese super elites or transplant tourists from innocent prisoners of conscience at a large scale. It's a pretty unique situation. I think it's the only scenario like this in the world where the government is doing organ trafficking in effect, or basically running cover for it because its top echelon has unlimited access to organs in perpetuity. And just super briefly how it works, it's kind of the opposite of an ethical system. In an ethical system, if I need a new heart, there needs to be a catastrophic accident. There's a whole process, ethical process that has to be followed. The organ has to match you if you're going to be the recipient. Then there's a whole field of people waiting to get that organ, right? In fact, and there's also, even their ethical situations, Secretary Kennedy just recently decertified one system when they got too easy on determining that someone was actually dead to get that organ. In China, it's the opposite, or in a way, it's the exact reverse. Basically, if I'm a wealthy transplant tourist, I've got my 100 or 200 grand, or a Chinese super elite, I make that transaction. What they have is they have a large group of incarcerated people. They built this whole industry in the early 2000s on the backs of Falun Gong practitioners, which they mass incarcerated after they determined that they wanted to eradicate this group. But they've kind of turned them into a political class enemy. They pushed mass dehumanizing propaganda out against them. When these people resisted being dehumanized, they said, we're not evil like you say at scale. They incarcerated them. And then they started blood typing and tissue typing and organ scanning them and created a kind of a database, an organ bank, where these innocent people that are incarcerated can now be used and killed to order. That's the reason that my book is called Kill to Order. Another 14 or 15 years goes by, and they add a second group, the Uyghur Muslims in the northwest of China. And that whole region over there is actually run as a kind of a police state. So they incarcerated more than 1 million of them, but they're actually blood typing and tissue typing people in their homes to, again, create this organ bank. And we're talking 60 to 100,000 transplants annually. So this is a huge deal, about a $9 billion annual industry, way beyond anything that we see in sort of normal cartel trafficking, which is also, frankly, quite horrible.
Yeah, and you write in Kill to Order that this system is the logical outcome of a system that sustains itself through any means to serve the party's ends. How does this system of forced organ harvesting reflect the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party and the true nature of our enemy?
Thank you for finding that. That's a great line in the book, if I may say so. I think the key here is we're not looking at a normal government. Okay, we're looking at something that views people like here in America, in any country which exists in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and not just the Judeo-Christian tradition, frankly, even also the Confucian tradition, pre-communism in communist China. There's this sense of the innate dignity of an individual, the value of an individual human being, the value of the people, the person. And in communist China and communist ideology, human beings are kind of like fodder, okay, to be used. And certainly the epitome of this scene is seen in the Chinese Communist Party. And I would argue that this organ transplant industry, I mean, imagine this, right? If you're a Chinese super elite, right, and you want to live longer, of course, you don't you have to accept the fact that people are going to be killed for your organs. Innocent people are going to be killed. But you have that. I remember getting an obituary that was written about a very high-ranking Chinese official a few years ago, where the person that what was written into the obituary is that the guy bragged about having multiple organs transplanted. Right? He was actually, this was something that was sort of seen as a positive thing in this extremely creepy obituary. So that sort of thing is possible. It's sort of unimaginable for us. Like I actually had a lot of difficulty explaining that this was real to people in the early years,
Right.
because it sounds so monstrous, right? It sounds so sort of against some of our basic dignity. And of course, the exact opposite of what we would consider Hippocratic medicine.
Yeah, it's monstrous, it's horrific, but it forces us to ask the question, too, that you address in Kill to Order, which is the U.S. somehow, in some ways, complicit in this system? Does our transplant system also interact with China's in some way?
We believed for the longest time that we were going to change China through engagement, through putting a lot of money in cooperation and transferring technology and so forth. This was a pipe dream. Of course, a lot of people made a lot of money on the American side around this pipe dream. The reality is it kind of happened in the reverse. They influenced us, but in the process, we've actually, to give you an example, an extreme example, we actually trained some of those transplant surgeons. For people that think, oh, that's something that's far away, has nothing to do with us, at the very least, we shouldn't be, for example, training the surgeons. We shouldn't be funding research projects at Chinese transplant institutions through the NIH, which has happened. At some scale, I might add. We shouldn't have hospital partnerships. We shouldn't have teaching partnerships. We shouldn't provide ECMO machines, which is a kind of a profusion machine, right? That portable that these transplant hospitals use extensively. That's American technology. We shouldn't provide, instruments and solutions. So there's all sorts of ways that we're kind of deeply embedded. And the key part is that, all our state institutions, whether it's the NIH, whether it's HHS more broadly, they haven't quite figured out that these transplant institutions in China are doing this.
Yeah.
Because if you obviously you wouldn't want to interact with
We're
institutions
just
like
out of
this.
time. Kill to Order is the new book available now. Thanks for joining us.
Nurse setting.
It's Daybreak with Steve and I.P. Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in for both of them, one for the price of two, as I say, as I fill in. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, ScottBertram, and scottbertram.com. Thanks to Jan Jekielek for joining us. That new book, Kill to Order, it's frightening, horrifying, scary stuff. We only scratched the surface during the interview. You can find more in the book. Again, just to do a little plug, I had a longer conversation with him on last week's edition of the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts. This portion of the show brought to you by Ghost Bed. I didn't sleep terribly well last night because I was up late watching the White Sox and Red Sox in an extra inning game that my White Sox ended up losing. Now, Ghost Bed can't help me with that if I'm upset because my baseball team lost. But if you sleep hot, especially in the summer months, well, that's where Ghost Bed can help. People blame the heat, but could be your mattress trapping that heat. And if you already sleep hot, then, well, summer just makes things worse. That's why Ghost Bed is here. Ghost Bed helps keep you cool all night. No waking up sweaty, tossing and turning, throwing the covers off at 2 a.m. That cooling technology is built into every mattress. It's not an expensive upgrade you've got to pay extra for. Hot sleepers are some of Ghost Bed's happiest customers. You can check the reviews and see what they have to say. GhostBed gives you 101 nights to try things out. You can sleep the rest of the summer and into the fall and feel the difference for yourself. GhostBed also currently having a sale. That's a great four-letter word. Sale for Daybreak viewers and listeners at extra 10% off. With financing, some Ghost Beds are only around $1 a day. Ghostbed.com/Gruber. Use the promo code Gruber. That's ghostbed.com/Gruber. And use the promo code Gruber for Ghostbed. Remember, 101 nights to try things at home for yourself. See how it works. Ghostbed.com/Gruber. My buddy Christian Schneider is coming up next. He's a columnist at National Review Online. Wrote for many years for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Has covered Wisconsin politics for decades at this point. We're going to preview Tuesday's primary, particularly on the Democratic side, and he'll tell you about the strengths and perhaps weaknesses of Tom Tiffany, the Republican in the Badger State. That's up next. Scott Bertram in here on Daybreak. Here we go. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're back on Monday. You've got me through the rest of this morning. Find me on X at Scott Bertram. That's my name. ScottBertram.com. Happy to be joined by friend Christian Schneider, who writes for National Review Online, columnist there, contributing to the Wall Street Journal's Free Expression newsletter. Also, you can find his Substack, Christian Schneider, and he's my co-host for the great show, Wasn't That Special? 50 years of Saturday Night Live. No SNL talk this morning, but if you want to find more, wasn'tthatspecial.com. We've watched every single episode ever and remained friends through the entire ordeal. Christian, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Also a keen observer of the passing political scene in Wisconsin for a couple of decades now, and you live in Madison or the Madison area, so that's got to be an experience. We've got a really odd Democratic primary shaping up in Wisconsin. Candidates getting in, getting out, scandals for a few of them. People will be on the ballot who are no longer running anymore. Votes have been cast for weeks at this point. And it all could lead to a socialist, a Democratic Socialists of America, DSA candidate Francesca Hong being the nominee. What's your read on this race as we head toward Tuesday? The establishment is trying to coalesce around another candidate, but is it too late?
Yeah, this has shades of the 2020 presidential election when everybody realized that Bernie Sanders was hurtling towards getting the nomination. And suddenly everybody got out and said, "Hey, we can't let this happen, have a socialist representing Democrats." And that's about what you have here with Francesca Hong, pretty comfortably in the lead of the race at this point, which has, as you said, has had ups and downs. I mean, this is a real soap opera that's been going on. Francesca Hong is so far to the left that Bernie Sanders himself actually won't even endorse her.
Right,
So
right.
he just said that yesterday. So yeah, you have kind of your more establishment candidates. Governor Tony Evers, who is more of an establishment kind of middle of the road Democrat, has endorsed David Crowley, who is the county executive in Milwaukee, is running against Francesca Hong. And she is backed by the Democratic Socialists of America. She has been out campaigning with Hassan Piker, who, for those people that don't know, he's kind of this streamer who's anti-Semitic, who said that America deserved 9/11 and those things.
Look, Christian, Mike Rogers is going to make sure the entire country knows who Hassan Piker is over the next couple of weeks. Don't worry about it.
Right. I mean, Bernie Sanders actually endorsed Abdul al-Sayed, but he won't endorse Francesca Hong. So, yeah. So your uncle on Facebook who says all these things that Democrats believe, Francesca Hong actually believes all those things. She fell for every kookball woke idea during the COVID years and the George Floyd years, wanting to abolish the police. She's been backing up on basically every position that she's ever had, including she suggested that we cancel Thanksgiving at some point, and now she's all over the radio and podcasts with the Pod Bros saying, well, no, Thanksgiving's my favorite holiday. But, of course, years ago, she was saying it's a colonialist thing with, run by oppressors. And so there is, I mean, she's the dream of, faculty lounges everywhere. And it's just a case of whether people in Wisconsin decide that they want a full-blown socialist to be their governor. And on the Republican side, you have Tom Tiffany, who's a Republican congressman, kind of middle of the road. He's MAGA adjacent. He has his issues where he won't say who won the 2020 election in Wisconsin and things like that. But it's just a really interesting test because you have what figures to kind of be a down year for Trump in Wisconsin. And so the Democrats should have an edge, but that's all in theory because they are running somebody who is so far to the left of the voters of Wisconsin that is actually going to probably turn out to be a pretty close race.
David Crowley, who is the one establishment candidate left in the race, but don't call him establishment. He says that's a slur. Said that earlier this week. But he was talking to Pod Save America, and I saw this morning, and he said, as I traveled across Wisconsin, people are afraid of socialism in Wisconsin. So they want somebody who's going to be pragmatic and who's going to get things done. Is that your sense in Madison and elsewhere? Are people scared of socialism in Wisconsin?
No, that is not the sense that I've been getting, because if you look at every poll, Francesca Hong is running away with this thing. So it looks like Donald Trump may have broken the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Democrats figure that they've seen kind of the insanity within the Republican Party. And rather than run somebody to the opposite of Donald Trump, who might actually be, reasonable and middle of the road, they've decided, well, we need to get ourselves some of that crazy. And so they're running with Francesca Hong. And yeah, I mean, David Crowley has problems of his own. He had an anonymous Twitter feed at some point. I think it was Twitter,
Yeah.
where he said all these like sexual things about women. And so, he at one point got out of the race and had to get back in the race once Sarah Rodriguez, the former lieutenant governor, had to get out of the race because of gross financial mismanagement of her campaign. And then Mandela Barnes, who is a statewide figure, former lieutenant governor. The state's full of former lieutenant governors, and Governor Tony Evers wouldn't endorse any of them, of his former lieutenant governors. And so, yeah, this race has had everything. Mandela Barnes had to get out of the race because of some allegations that came out about him and dating women and things like that. So it's been a crazy race, including the fact that from the get-go, Republicans thought they would want to pick the Democrat that they would run against. And they said, Francesca Hong is the one that we think that we can beat. This is kind of similar to Texas, where they tried to pick what's her name, the Texas Congresswoman
Crockett.
Jasmine
Crockett.
Yeah, Jasmine Crockett, and failed in that. But so Republicans all along have been talking up Francesca Hong as a serious candidate, and now they got what they asked for. And they're playing with fire here because if you believe the polls, she's got a fighter's chance against Tom Tiffany in November. So we don't know what's going to happen.
Also want to see how early voting plays into this, how many votes already have been sunk into Mandela Barnes and Sarah Rodriguez, who are no longer running in this race anymore, and is it too many to help Crowley make up that difference on Election Day? We'll see. That's Tuesday next week in Wisconsin. Christian Schneider, find him on X. Also read him at National Review Online, Wall Street Journal Free Expression. Find the Substack and listen to our podcast if you enjoy our banter together. Wasn'tThatSpecial.com, a show about Saturday Night Live. It's a ton of fun. So is Christian Schneider, even early on a Central Time Zone morning. Christian, thanks so much for joining us here on Daybreak.
All right, thanks for having me.
It's Daybreak. It's Steve and Ivy Gruber. Good morning to you on this Friday all across this great country of ours. Scott Bertram filling in. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, also scottbertram.com. The show's out there at Steve Gruber Show on X and stevegruber.com. Don't forget those podcasts are out there after the show. If you missed something or want to hear it again, share with friends. Check out the podcasts and the video, too, over at Rumble for Steve Gruber and Daybreak. Got a little catch-all segment here. A few things that have been piling up through the week that I want to talk about before my fill-in stint comes to an end. So 3 things, if I may. First, do I have to say something about the burrito discourse? And if I say that, do you even know what I'm talking about? This has been an online thing, although it's spilled over into the vice president saying something and people discussing affordability. And so it started with someone complaining to, I think, one of Charlie Kirk's producers, and who hosts the Charlie Kirk show now, about one of the summer interns, complaining about affordability and saying, I can't afford $20 burritos. I can't believe a burrito costs $20. And that sparked an entire offshoot conversation about people saying, yes, $20 burritos are too much. You can't afford them. Other people saying, well, why are you paying $20 for a burrito? Go to Kroger, get that 8-pack of El Monterey things, and it's like $6, and you've got 8 of them, and it's less than $1 a burrito. I mean, if you don't have a lot of money, learn to budget and how to spend it. Other people saying, well, this is just the way things are. You live in the big city, and you got to go eat out. You got to do that. So there's a whole burrito discourse out there. My main stance is the only burritos people should be talking about are the Flying Burrito Brothers, a great band from the late 70s or late 60s, early 70s, playing country rock involving the great Graham Parsons. But on the top, I shop for all the family's groceries. It's actually one of the highlights of my week because I'm uncool. I like budgeting for groceries. I like going to Kroger, finding the sales. If you know how to shop, if you know how to cook, if you know how to use ingredients, if you want to make your own at-home burrito, everything's a lot more affordable. If you're paying Uber Eats to get you the burrito, and then, as someone put it, like literally ferrying the burrito to you in its own car via Uber Eats, well, you're going to pay for it. And you can't do that over and over again and not think it affects your pocketbook or your bottom line. Are things less affordable? Have prices increased? Of course. There's no doubt. President Trump's doing his best to tamp down inflation, but we saw 8-9% inflation rates during the Biden administration, and it's hard to come back from that. Things are more expensive. Groceries are more expensive. Burritos are more expensive. But if you're a young person, if you're an intern, if you're a 22-year-old, 23-year-old starting out, should your diet be based solely around buying $20 burrito takeout via Uber Eats? No, please don't do that. Learn how to shop. Learn how to shop for sale items. Learn how to cook at home. Put some stuff in the freezer. It is my number one piece of advice that I give our graduates who are leaving Hillsdale, which is, if you want to save money, if you want to build something, don't go to the bar to drink and don't eat out that much. Not saying you can't, but don't do it every day. Don't go out for lunch every day. Brown bag your lunch like Scott Walker did for years as governor of Wisconsin. Bring a ham and cheese sandwich. That's how you can save money. Build towards something. Build toward a house. Build toward whatever you want. But you can't do it. My number one piece of advice, if you want to make it, you got to save money. Don't go out to eat as much as you might want to. You have to want to save money. You have to want to save towards something more than you want the $20 burrito. Okay. I don't know if that's popular or unpopular. I think this might be unpopular, but it's been gnawing at me a bit too. Ben Sasse, the former Nebraska U.S. Senator who is dying. He has cancer, and he's doing a bunch of interviews. He's actually lived longer than they told him he would after his diagnosis. He gave an interview with Jake Tapper over last weekend, and he talked about his deepest regrets as he looks back now. And I had a reaction to this. This is Ben Sasse, cut 5.
I have serious regret about how much I traveled. I would just come back from all my trips and take all the hotel keys and throw them on the floor of a closet in my home office, and all of a sudden it became thousands and thousands of keys. And you're like, that's a hell of a lot of missed dinners.
And you look at it kind of like forlornly.
I would look at my kids and I felt like they had a chain around their neck with an hourglass. And I was watching the years, the months or the years or the dinners we had left as a family. And I'd look at my kids and I'd see the sand through the hourglass. I'm like, what the hell was I doing instead of being with you?
All right, Ben Sass. First of all, let me say this. If I were in his position, I would almost certainly say the exact same thing. I sympathize with all of it. But I struggle a bit with this sentiment that is shaming dads for working and for being out of the house and for traveling and for doing what's needed to do to support a family. Because if we can agree that it's impossible, simply impossible, for as much as a dad might want to be at home all the time with his children, breakfast, lunch, dinner, 7 days a week, would that be great? Yes, it'd be outstanding. Ben Sass looks back about the wasted time at his travel, but the travel meant something. The travel accomplished something. Did Ben Sass have a calling? Did God put him on this earth to be a senator, to be a leader, to lead a college, a university for a few years? Was that what he was supposed to do on this earth? And to accomplish that, did he have to be away from home? Did he have to travel a bit? Because after we agree that being home all the time, every day, is not possible or plausible, then we're just arguing about degrees. How much should you be away from home? What if you being away from home and traveling a bit more means that your wife doesn't have to work at all and she can stay home with the kids every day, all throughout the week, and you have one parent who's home all the time and you have to travel a bit more? At that point, it's all degrees of trade-offs. Life is a lot of trade-offs. But I see this every now and then. And again, if I were Ben Sass, I'm sure I'd say the same thing. But every now and then you see the sentiment that if dad's not there all the time, if dad's traveling for work, if dad's not there for every meal, that's a huge regret. I'm sure I'd say the same thing. But look, there are trade-offs, and I don't know if we should shame dads in that manner. More Daybreak next.
You ever find yourself wondering
It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in on this Friday morning. The NFL season kicks off. Hall of Fame game last night. And if Brock doesn't mention it, I can tell you the Red Sox beat the White Sox because I stayed up far too late watching that extra inning game. Brock has a sports update for us on this Friday.
With a look at sports, I'm Brock Palmbush. The 107th National Football League season began last night with the annual Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio. The Carolina Panthers beat the Arizona Cardinals 33-30. Panthers backup quarterback Haynes King scored from 5 yards out on the last play of the game to give Carolina the win. Two more running back signings in the NFL. The Indianapolis Colts gave Jonathan Taylor a 2-year extension worth $44 million, and the Detroit Lions gave Jahmyr Gibbs a 3-year contract extension worth $67.5 million. In Major League Baseball, there were 11 games. American League winners included Boston, Minnesota, and the LA Angels. National League winners included the New York Mets, Cincinnati, and San Diego. Beau Hossler shot a 9-under par 61 to take the first-round lead at the PGA Tour's Wyndham Championship in Greensboro, North Carolina. And 3 games in the WNBA last night. Winners were Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and Portland. That's a look at sports. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Brock. Coming up hour 3 of Daybreak. Stick around with us. Steve Doolin, Dennis Neely, and Scott Wheeler all will round out the week for us here on the program. This portion of Daybreak brought to you by Birch Gold. You don't wait until your house is on fire to install a smoke detector. You don't wait until the wind and the rain hammers your windows, the power goes out to prepare for a hurricane, and you don't reach for the seatbelt after the impact of the crash, because after the crash, the hurricane, the house fire, it's too late. You don't want to wait until the dollar goes to zero before you buy gold. It's too late then. Diversify with precious metals now, because you never know what will threaten your savings next. Persistent inflation, a weakening dollar, unexpected financial not distributions, that would be okay. Disruptions, those are worse. You don't know what's coming, but you can take a preventative step. Do that right now by requesting a free info kit on gold from Birch Gold Group. Text America to 989898. No cost, no obligation, straightforward information on how you can diversify your savings, even an IRA or 401k with gold. Birch Gold. Text America to 989898 for more from Birch Gold. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy. They're back on Monday. Daybreak continues next.
America's awake, and we're just getting started. The headlines that matter, the stories they won't tell you, and the voices fighting to be heard. This is your country, your morning, your daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. A new hour starts right now.
Live from the campus of Hillsdale College in beautiful Hillsdale, Michigan, this is Scott Bertram filling in for Steve and Ivy on Daybreak this Friday, August 7th of 2026. Thanks for being alongside, and here are three big things you need to know. 1, President Trump is signing new executive orders to restrict birthright citizenship and ban birth tourism. One order restricts birthright citizenship involving children of foreign diplomatic staff, children of people classified as alien enemies, and children born in U.S. territories. The other order bans citizenship to children born of mothers who entered the country for the sole purpose of having a child here. Expect some legal challenges in the near future. 2, U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn is the winner in the Republican primary for Tennessee governor. She defeated Congressman John Rose and State Representative Monty Fritz. All were running to replace term-limited GOP Governor Bill Lee. Meanwhile, Congressman Andy Ogles will lose his Republican primary in Tennessee to former state official Charlie Hatcher. And 3, the FCC has voted to scrap a decades-old rule limiting the reach of a single broadcaster. The previous cap restricted broadcasters from reaching more than 39% of the national television audience, but the FCC now says the change will help TV networks compete with major digital platforms. It's a new world out there, and the FCC is adjusting. That's where we start Hour 3 of Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're back on Monday with a week's worth of thoughts and opinions to share with you. You can find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, scottbertram.com. Always pleased and privileged to sit in for Steve and Ivy when they are gone on vacation. Although Steve's still posting some videos this week out on social media. You can find those if you like. This hour, Steve Doolin joins us to meet our daily quota of Steves on the show. Dennis Neely, formerly CNBC, and also Scott Wheeler, an investigative reporter in this Hour 3 of Daybreak on this Friday as we drive you into the weekend. We were 2.5 weeks away from students being back on campus here at Hillsdale College and classes beginning to start. Classes starting. Just say that. A couple thoughts about actually Hillsdale and journalism coming up before we're done at the top of the hour. We begin this hour with a couple of sound bites I played much earlier in the morning. If you were with us in the first hour, thank you for still being here. And if not, you're a late riser, that's okay too. We'll make sure you're still informed. Abdul El-Sayed and Mike Rogers, the U.S. Senate race is underway. This general election campaign featuring the most radical major party candidate ever nominated here in the U.S. and Abdul El-Sayed, and a pretty down-the-road, mainstream, middle-of-the-road kind of Republican in Mike Rogers, a guy who I think has the capability to craft a Trump-like coalition, meaning he could appeal to conservatives and mainstream Republicans and right-of-center people and centrists and moderates, and now opening things up to Jewish voters, pro-Israel voters, working class, blue-collar voters who did not vote for Abdul El-Sayed on Tuesday of this week in the primary, and those who just don't like socialism, which should be a fairly big portion of the electorate. Socialism is bad. Socialism is evil. Communism, both bad and evil as well. It should be easy for elected officials and those who wish to rise to higher office to simply say that. Socialism, evil. Jocelyn Benson, current Secretary of State, wants to be governor. She's the Democratic nominee. She was asked by WWMT News about socialism. Is it evil? She would not agree with the premise. Listen to this. This is Jocelyn Benson earlier this week, cut 9.
Secretary of State Benson, I just wanted to ask you, so your opponent is saying that you're pushing a socialist agenda, and he keeps calling out socialism, saying that it's evil. What do you have to say to him about that?
I mean, I think the only thing evil is when leaders claim to work for the people but really don't. I've worked for the people every day of my professional career. I'm going to be a governor who puts people first, lowers costs, grows our economy, and does everything I can to protect the rights and freedoms that are earned by every citizen in this state. My opponent can't say the same because he hasn't done the same, but I have, and I'll continue to do that as governor. Secretary.
That's Jocelyn Benson. If you're watching along with us, you see Governor Gretchen Whitmer standing right next to her with sort of this unchanging expression on her face. I can't tell if she liked the answer or didn't like the answer, but given the opportunity to simply say socialism is evil, Jocelyn Benson couldn't bring herself to do so and instead said, the only thing that's evil is saying you work for the people and then not working for the people. I don't know. I can think of a lot of things that are also evil and far worse than that, and socialism would be one of them. Jocelyn Benson couldn't bring herself to agree with that statement. We'll see how tightly she wants to be attached to the top of the ticket at Abdul El-Sayed and his socialist prescriptions for America and its economy. Speaking of Abdul El-Sayed, I spent part of this week begging someone, a journalist, to ask a question of Abdul El-Sayed. Last week during a debate, he said, I'm not a socialist. I'm a capitalist who knows how the system works. And I asked someone to ask Abdul El-Sayed, what do you like about capitalism? If you're not a socialist and you are a capitalist, you should be able to explain what you like about it. Why is it great? Why does it work for America? Why has it led to the greatest economy in the world? Unbeknownst to me, Camden Mulder of National Review, who was with us in the first hour of today's program, did ask Abdul El-Sayed that question on Tuesday of this week on Election Day, and she was nice enough to share that audio with us. So here's the question and the answer. Camden Mulder, National Review, talking to Abdul El-Sayed on Tuesday of this week, cut 10.
Camden Mulder with National Review. You've said that you're a capitalist, even though people continue to say that you're a socialist. Can you explain exactly what you like about capitalism?
It is the idea that you allow supply and demand to allocate capital at the micro level to enable people to make money in sustainable ways. The part that I have trouble with is that we don't live in capitalism. We live in corporatism, where we allow big corporations to move capital based on the interests of shareholders and a quarterly bottom line. That seems to be less about efficiently allocating capital based on supply and demand and more about maneuvering or manipulating financial markets in ways that are more about the best interests of the richest people rather than the enablement of the efficient allocation of capital.
All right, that's Abdul El-Sayed. What do you like about capitalism? You notice he also doesn't really answer the question. He begins with a very simple, anodyne definition of what capitalism is, and then moves on to say, but we don't have that. We have corporatism. We have this other thing. We don't even have capitalism, which is the thing that I like, but can't tell you why he likes it. The follow-up to that question, and I talked to Camden off the air, they were not entertaining follow-ups on the campaign trail earlier this week, but the follow-up to that question is also very simple, which is, if you like capitalism, and you say we don't have capitalism in the United States, then why are your policy prescriptions not more and increased capitalism instead of socialism and socialist ideas? That now would be an interesting question to ask. If the avowed capitalist, Abdul El-Sayed, likes capitalism so much, why does he have policy prescriptions that are right down the socialist lane? Steve Doolin coming up next. We'll talk about a few different things. Dennis Neely after the bottom of the hour as well. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy on this Friday morning daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram filling in. We go back into the world of music history, as we always do when I fill in. Birthdays, death days, anniversaries, number ones on this day. This happens to be a number one as we head back to 1976, the spirit of 76. 50 years ago today, this song hit number one on the charts. Elton John and Kiki D, Don't Go Breaking My Heart. Number one, 50 years ago today. Scott Bertram here as we fulfill our daily allotment, requirement of Steve on the show, by welcoming in Steve Doolin, professor, attorney, and frequent guest here on Daybreak. Steve, good morning to you.
Good morning, Scott.
Are you prepared for the amount of attention and the amount of money and the number of campaign ads that we are about to see here in Michigan over the next couple of months? Because this is going to be the most tightly contested, hottest, most expensive U.S. Senate race in the country as Mike Rogers and Abdul al-Sayed unfolds. I have to take the unpopular opinion here first, Steve, and say, frankly, I don't mind campaign ads. I don't. And maybe because I'm in the media and each one sounds like money to me for, whoever runs the broadcast outlet, but I don't care. I don't mind campaign ads at all. Bring them on. But are you prepared for the amount of attention Michigan's going to have these next few months?
I got to say, I don't mind campaign ads either. And, we've got young kids at home, and it's a teachable moment every time a campaign ad comes on, honestly.
Yeah.
But what I get frustrated with is the repetition. Once you've seen a campaign ad a couple of times, there's nothing else to learn from it. So I hope that they're entertaining. I hope that there's a variety. But I know we're going to get sick of hearing the same old song over and over pretty quickly.
I suppose it's true. Frequency is important in the world of advertising, as many people know, but we'll hear them frequent enough. No doubt about that. Steve, something popping through the Fifth Circuit with the National Firearms Act. What's happening there?
Yeah, fascinating case. There's a federal law that says that you can buy a machine gun, a silencer, a short-barreled shotgun, or a short-barreled rifle if you pay a tax. And the reason it's a tax law is because the law is so old, it's from before the federal government thought it could do anything, which didn't happen until the middle of World War II in a case called Wickard versus Filburn. So prior to that, the feds realized that the Constitution limits federal power, and so they made a tax to regulate silencers, for example. What happened last year in the big beautiful bill is the tax for the first time since 1934 was changed, and it was reduced to zero. So we just had a case in the Fifth Circuit where the argument was made successfully that if it's a tax law and the tax is zero, why am I going through the process of getting fingerprinted and registering my silencer? And the court agreed and said, well, I guess you don't have to. It's unconstitutional because you can't have a tax law requirement of the fingerprinting and getting the little card, the tax stamp it's called, without a tax. So if the tax is zero, you're right. So the federal restriction on silencers has gone away for the Fifth Circuit, which is down Texas and a few states surrounding Texas. But also because of recent changes in law, it doesn't apply nationwide. It doesn't apply to everybody because it's only parties before that bench. So it's not for everyone. I've got calls from people in other states, including Michigan, where I live and practice, where people are saying, "Oh, good, I don't have to register my silencers anymore, or suppressors, as they're referred to by the tactical guys." But it doesn't apply to everybody yet. So it's interesting. It's fascinating. It's logical, which is refreshing to gun owners to see logic applied for a change. Sorry, long soliloquy. I'm resisting the urge to teach you an hour class on it.
Well, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this question, but it's always the intricacies of government. How does something like reducing that tax to zero end up being a portion of the big, beautiful bill? Who's carrying that forward and making sure it's inside of a bill like that?
I don't know who was responsible for that one, but it was a brilliant move on the chessboard. Because you've got a tax law with a tax of 0, you can kind of see where the next move is going to be. It was a really brilliant swinging the knight out in the right direction at the right time in the chess game.
And we haven't talked since the Supreme Court announced they'll be hearing another gun case, I guess, in this very next term, correct? Involving it's an Illinois law, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's an assault weapons ban, so-called. We've had those come and go for years and years, a whole generation at this point. AR-15 ban, and in fact, I just found out I'm going to be doing an amicus brief for that one, and we've got a really good chance. It's definitely coming to the Supreme Court. They decided to take it up. We've got a really good chance at once and for all putting the final nail in the coffin of these so-called assault weapons bans, hopefully forever.
Is it a final nail, Steve? Aren't they going to find some other way to try to go about this in the future? Illinois always finds a way.
There's the gun banners, the gun grabbers remind me of the opening scene in Apocalypse Now, where Martin Sheen talks about how his enemy is always out there in the jungle waiting and never rests and never gives up. And that's exactly, I agree with you, Scott. That's exactly how the gun grabbers are. This debate has been raging since they were debating concealed daggers in ancient Rome. So I don't think it's ever going to go away.
All right, Steve Doolin, a professor, attorney, friend of the program. Always good to talk to you. Have a great weekend. Steve and Ivy back on Monday of next week. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Great to see you.
Back in a moment to continue. Scott Bertram filling in for Steve and Ivy. It's daybreak on this Friday morning, all across Michigan, all across the country. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're back on Monday of next week. Scott Bertram filling in on this Friday of this week. Good to be with you. Find me on X at Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, and scottbertram.com. This portion of the program brought to you by QE and the infrared facial mask. Something people keep talking about, the QE infrared facial mask. It's red and infrared light therapy. You can use at home to help support healthier looking skin, boost collagen, and soften the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. Instead of expensive spa treatments, you wear the mask for a few minutes a day. It's comfortable, easy to use, fits right into your routine. This mask you've seen here featured on the program. People are loving the results. Skip the costly spa visits. Go to ExodusStrong.com, ExodusStrong.com. Use the promo code Gruber. Get the mask for under $200. ExodusStrong.com, ExodusStrong.com/Gruber. Promo code Gruber for the QE infrared facial mask. Again, ExodusStrong.com/Gruber. Saw earlier this week, two former 60 Minutes correspondents teaching at Columbia Journalism School, Sharon Alfonsi and Scott Pelley, two people who could not work with Barry Weiss, a basically left of center kind of journalist who's now taken over at CBS. You know what's happened over there. And they are welcomed over at Columbia Journalism School to teach those Columbia journalism students how to be good, liberal, mainstream media reporters. We have the opposite philosophy here at Hillsdale as we teach journalism. Don't go to journalism school. You can't even major in journalism here. It's a minor. Major in something you want to know more about: history, English, the sciences, physics, politics, and then minor in journalism, because you learn journalism by doing journalism, by writing, by hosting shows, by conducting interviews. Do the work. You don't need extra years of journalism school. By the way, we have guests here too. Mary Catherine Ham, Catherine Harridge, Carol Markowitz, Miranda Devine, Dominic Green, Chris Rufo, Selena Zito, Heather McDonald. Those are some of our Pulliam Fellows here through the years who help teach our journalism students as well here at Hillsdale College. Scott Bertram sitting in for Steve and Ivy here on the Friday Daybreak. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber on this Friday, August 7th, and back into the world of music history. On this day in 1982, 44 years ago today, Fleetwood Mac topped the charts on the album side with Mirage. After the relative disappointing sales of Tusk, they came back with Mirage, which did very well. Love this song called Hold Me. Lindsey Buckingham, a musical genius who, despite being pretty well known, doesn't get the credit he deserves as a songwriter, producer, arranger, guitar player, singer. He's great. Fleetwood Mac, #1 on this day back in 1982 with the Mirage album. Dennis Neal is with us, previously CNBC and Fox Business. You can find him on X these days. You can find him writing books, one on Elon Musk and one. Talk a bit more today, Oregoners, how one state chased away business and people. Dennis, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy Friday.
Good Friday to you as well. Talk about California, talk about New York. Wisconsin's got a choice coming up on Tuesday of chasing away business and people by potentially nominating a socialist on the Democratic side of the ticket for governor, and Francesca Hong. I think it's interesting. My friend Mark Hemingway is also an Oregon native, and as we've talked a little bit about how the state has driven away, as you say, businesses and people look toward New York City on the East Coast and California on the West Coast as these examples of bad government and the consequences. But as you point out, Oregon has a template that's already been executed, and we know the results. What happened in Oregon?
We're already seeing the outcomes. I lived in Brooklyn for 43 years. I moved down to SoFlo, South Florida, only in January. So, why didn't I write a book on New York going to the hell paved with socialism? Well, it's because New York is so big and fat and diverse and strong that it'll take forever to kill it. So the outcomes don't show up as in sharp relief. In Oregon, 4.2 million population, that's half the size of just New York City. In Oregon, those outcomes show up really painfully, and the state is reeling from it. You've got to understand a few things. Thousands of people, jobs, businesses, growth, migrating elsewhere to states that don't have as high a taxes. Portland, second highest taxes in the country to only New York City. And yet in Portland, a 20-minute wait for a violent 911 call. Portland Metro spends over $700 million a year on homeless. They had a 64% increase in homeless in just 2 years. Portland police at 1993 staffing levels because of defund the police, and then an effort to raise that up to meet almost the national average is rejected even by liberal pro-minority groups because they're getting grant money from the Clean Energy Fund that would have to, fork over $200 million. So it's just NGOs out of control, labor unions out of control, Democrat supermajority out of control. But now, Scott, there is a pushback. There is hope. For the first time since 1982, Oregon may elect a Republican governor, Christine Drazan. That would send a message to the rest of the blue states. You've gone too far. You've gone too crazy.
Yeah. Oregon is one of those great white whales out there. It seems every time we got a chance, Republicans have a chance. Was it ex-NBA player Chris Dudley ran a few times? I thought maybe he could win.
met him. Yeah.
Okay. So what's different about this time?
Well, what's different about this time is even Democrat liberals in Oregon are fed up with the policies. In the fall, Save Our Cities, a lobbying group, came out with a survey. It said 68%, I think it was, of Oregon residents believe that the state's headed in the seriously wrong direction. A majority believe that our liberal policies are hurting business and business growth. And so there's a pushback. You had 250,000 signatures to put on the ballot a proposal wiping out the $4 billion transportation tax increase that the Democrat governor pushed through in an emergency session of the legislature. And then in May primary, 83% of voters voted in favor of that proposal to wipe out the Kotex proposal. Her approval ratings are lower. I think they might be lower than President Trump's. And let's remember that President Trump in 2024 got more votes in Oregon, supposedly a red state, but really it's purple, got more votes in Oregon than Tina Kotek won the governorship to get those votes in 2022, fewer votes.
Dennis Neal is with us. His book, Oregoners, How One State Chased Away Businesses and People. You can find him over on X as well. And Oregon, too, had this brief experimentation with drug experimentation, decriminalizing drugs. And it was such a complete disaster that, what was it, about a year? They had to go back and reverse course. What was the effect of decriminalization on businesses and people in the state of Oregon?
absolutely devastating. It was 2020 or 2021 it went into effect. Let's decriminalize everything, basically. And gee, it was well intended, I'm sure. Let's hand out free needles and free clean tin foil for smoking your drugs just about anywhere you wanted. And crime rose, everything attendant to it rose. Homelessness rose, crime rose, drug addiction rose. Among fentanyl caused deaths, the numbers tripled in just 2 or 3 years, tripled. And then in 2024, the state legislature votes to undo what the liberals got onto the ballot proposal and the voters approved. And yet 2 years later, you can drive past an area in Portland and get 3 fentanyl pills for $1. You can see people smoking openly on the streets still. It terrifies people who don't want to go downtown and other neighborhoods where they are and where the homeless are camped, because the county for a time was handing out tents and tarps. And hey, man, go where you want. And this is what Mamdani is now doing in New York City. He's not handing out tents yet, but he's allowing a 12 blocks segment on the Upper West Side or Middle West Side, allowing tents to set up there, homeless to set up there, which will only draw more homeless. And it's just the worst decision, because everything else that's bad increases with that. Fires, reports of sexual assault, prostitution, illegal drug sales, and on and on.
Where are you seeing some of these other bad ideas from Oregon being exported to various places across the country?
Well, what is with the Muslim socialist takeover of the direction of the Democrat Party? We're electing and nominating socialists all over the freaking place. I can't even believe it. And it's usually these blue, ridiculous blue cities, blue states. It's Michigan, it's Maine, it's Colorado has just gone crazy. Austin in Texas. It is this liberal rural divide in state after state. New York has the same thing, where Trump won most of the counties, but because that little New York City area there, man, votes, he lost the state. I mean, I was a lifelong registered Democrat for all of my life until moving down here to South Florida. I don't recognize the party anymore. They've just gone utterly bizarre. New York City, the most capitalist, wealth-creating city in the history of the world, probably, elects a Muslim socialist as the mayor. Are you guys crazy? And it turns out in Portland, they said, hey, oh my beer. A year earlier, they represented 4 socialists to their city council.
Yeah.
And they now control the agenda. And that's what's happening to the party.
Dennis Neal, former CNBC and Fox Business, and now writing elsewhere and also on X. You can find the book Oregoners, How One State Chased Away Business and People, and find Dennis on X as well. Dennis, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Have a glorious weekend, sir. It's up to us to make it so.
That's right. Appreciate it, sir. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. Scott Bertram sitting in. We dig back into the world of music history. On this day in 2024, 2 years ago, Jack Russell, the lead singer of the band Great White, passed away at the age of 63 years old. Had a big hit with this one, Once Bitten, Twice Shy, originally an Ian Hunter song from Mott the Hoople. Jack Russell from Great White passed away on this day 2 years ago at the age of 63 years old. Joined now by Scott Wheeler, an investigative journalist and national security expert. You can find him on X at Newscap Group, and his Substack is scottwheeler.substack.com. Scott, thanks so much for joining us.
It's good to be with you, Scott.
Reading about your work and remembering now, 18 months ago, 2 months ago, 2 years ago or so, the series of pro-life clinic fire bombings in various places across the country. Yours specifically in Amherst, New York, but I know they were elsewhere. I recall talking about them here on the program with Steve. It was probably more than 2 years ago at this point. And you've done some work on looking into this one in Amherst. Tell us what you found and what has been missed in this particular case.
Well, about 4 years ago, right immediately following the leak of the Dobbs decision, these fire bombings began taking place across the country. There have been some estimates put it over 300 incidences. And about 3.5 years ago, I was contacted because I'm a journalist and was enticed to go take a look. And so I started investigating. Immediately, I determined that it was Antifa. It was not. They were signing it Jane's Revenge, but there was unusual similarities to Antifa style attacks. And so we established that it was, in fact, an Antifa operation. And in fact, the first leak of the Dobbs of the first appearance of Jane's Revenge, which is how they were signing it, appeared in a pro Antifa publication. And so we started deconstructing it from there. It actually, didn't think it would take that long, but the FBI did not seem to be very interested in these cases. And so I investigated the one in Amherst because it's a Buffalo suburb, and there was a tremendous Compass Care was the clinic, and the CEO, Jim Harden, is such a tremendous guy. He stayed on this and stayed on top of it and encouraged me to continue investigating it. We got to a point where we found a couple of suspects, and we went and confronted them. You can see the video. It's about a 7-minute piece. It's free at Substack, scottwheeler.substack.com. And you can see what happened there. And we've got the security camera footage of the firebombing. Shows me confronting the suspects. And hopefully, if enough people get the political level of the FBI, which is now in good hands, involved in this, they'll make some arrests. But I think if it's left to the field offices, probably nothing's going to happen.
There were a series of these, as you said, 4 years ago. I said 18 months. Time flies. Just unbelievable. But was the FBI at all more interested in following up on any of these other cases in these series of fire bombings? Was there anything about this one in particular that sort of got put on the back burner?
Well, it was one of the more violent ones, and so it should have had the most interest. But the FBI there have been probably no more than half a dozen arrests among these 300 separate cases. And so the FBI's demonstrated no interest in tackling these investigations. In fact, when the former Attorney General was asked on Capitol Hill in a hearing why he hadn't done it, he said, well, it's done at night and we don't have people working at night. He said the operators were working at night and we don't, it's outside of our normal working hours. But they've had no problem arresting pro-life protesters at abortion clinics. They've been arrested and heavily prosecuted. It's been clearly an uneven uh, imposition of justice in those cases versus these where you actually had violent attacks that were dangerous and got firemen hurt, and in some of these cases fighting the fires, and tremendous damages, hundreds of thousands of dollars in each case. And yet the FBI has shown no interest in solving these.
Scott Wheeler, investigative reporter. Find him on X at Newscap Group. ScottWheeler.substack.com. We'll link you to this video as well, 7 minutes or so. What were some of the key pieces that allowed you to put the puzzle together in this Amherst case?
Well, the Compass Care security footage had recorded the attack, and so you could see the two figures getting out of a car. You could see the license plate. You could identify a lot of details about the car, and so we started tracking suspects, people who had that kind of car and who fit those body types. It's very difficult because the perpetrators in this case all nearly erased their entire profiles off social media. We couldn't find them anywhere, and in the very few images that are identified with those names, it isn't them. And so they went to great lengths to go into hiding. And in one case, a guy we think wore a fake beard. He didn't leave his house except under certain circumstances. We staked him out for weeks at a time and got close-up videos. And then once we believed they were the suspects, we confronted them and were met with violent reaction.
Yeah. Scott Wheeler can be found on X at Newscap Group and scottwheeler.substack.com for more information about his work on this case and that YouTube video as well. Scott, thanks so much for joining us here this morning on Daybreak.
Thanks. Good to be with you, Scott.
Thank you. It's Daybreak with Steve and Ivy Gruber. They're back on Monday morning. Steve and Ivy return with a week's worth of thoughts and opinions to share with you. Steve's been updating a bit with video on social media throughout the course of the week. You can find those online at Steve Gruber Show, stevegruber.com, of course. If you want to follow me, I'd be honored. At Scott Bertram, SCOTBERTRAM, or find work at scottbertram.com. Thanks to guests today, Camden Mulder, way back in hour number 1 with National Review following the Michigan Senate race this week. Adam Butcher, hour 1 as well. Jan Kalik with his book Kill to Order. Christian Schneider in Wisconsin. Then Steve Doolin, Dennis Neal, and Scott Wheeler here in hour 3. If you missed anything, want to see and hear it again, share with friends, do it via the podcasts. Find them at stevegruber.com. Link off of there, wherever you find your audio. Rumble's got the video clips, and they're out there thanks to our fine staff behind the scenes. Brock, Anthony, Sarah, getting things done and ready to go. A couple of years now, I always say that it's longer, 15 years ago, Domino's started this trend, which you see now in more than a few places, of coming out to consumers and saying, we stink, our product stinks, but we're getting better, and you should try us again. Domino's came out and said, our pizza's bad, so we changed the recipe. You should try us again. And Domino's stock, I don't know if this is still true, but for a while, Domino's stock had outperformed Amazon and all these amazing tech stocks. Domino's had gone up by a higher percentage. Anyway, Burger King has kind of tried the same thing. If you've seen their recent television ads telling people, hey, Burger King, we were bad. We know it, but now we've changed. You should come back and try it again. Apparently, people are listening. Burger King had an 8.5% rise in U.S. same-store sales for the most recent quarter. Upgrades to its signature Whopper. Ad campaign saying says it's bringing people back to the stores for the first time in a long time. Gains come as McDonald's posts some softer U.S. traffic and then also changed its U.S. president, too. So maybe that's a strategy for a lot of, at least food companies out there. We are terrible, but we know it, and we're changing and getting better. Try us again. We've always been good here on Daybreak, and the only change is Steve and Ivy back on Monday. Thanks for spending the week with me at Scott Bertram on X, scottbertram.com. Have a great weekend.